So now that we went through all the variations for capital stems as well as the entrance strokes, we're now going to actually implement that onto our letters. So for the following couple of lessons, I'm actually going to demonstrate writing out some uppercase letters for you guys. And I wanted you to take this time to experiment with all of the things that we talked about and actually putting it into your letters. So the first category are going to be your letters that contain capital stems, and then we're going to move on to letters that enter into your letter with a horizontal oval, and then we're going to move on to vertical oval, entrance strokes, and then finally we'll end out with capital letters that begin with your compound curve entrance stroke. Okay, so for this group one, there's going to be 5 letters that we do together. All of these letters contain the capital stem stroke, the S curve, and so the first letter we're going to be doing together is the letter A. Scribble, make sure my ink is flowing. Okay, so here is your, and make this loop back up. And there. And then come back up on top, add a small loop on top. Below the baseline, and then we're going to finish off with that loop. One loop. And we're going to add a crossbar, a curved crossbar. It's all hairline. Have a nice curve both at the front and the end. And I like to add a flick mark across the crossbar. Okay, so again, this one, there's again so many variations from even this particular letter. We talked about if you wanted to close off this loop, if you wanted to bring up this loop. Okay. Again, I'm keeping in mind the spacing between here, my first loop, and my capital stem. Even you can always add a loop, but just making sure that it stays narrow. Okay, this loop is a horizontal loop. This loop is still being bisected by the slant line. Okay, this capital stem, make sure this one is on the slant line. Okay, and this one is another horizontal oval within this loop here, but then you also have a bigger loop here, as well as if you wanted to bring this loop up, there's your third loop. Okay, now we're going to do the letter M. Starting with your capital stem, bringing it back up, adding your loop into your horizontal oval. So notice I like to go from your vertical oval to your horizontal oval. From here, I'm going to add on your M, and then from here, I like to extend out this hairline above the second center line. And this is one of those flourishes that we did for our ascending stem loops. Okay. It was like hard to talk and write, so this curve is not ideal. I would have wanted to actually go through here and maintain this oval shape here. Okay, so that line should cross there. And then for the bottom, I'm going to add in our figure 8. So I hope that being able to name your flourishes helps you to know how you're going to, which flourish to use. Okay, here's your figure 8 flourish to just cover that descending space. Again, a couple of things that I'm just looking at when I'm looking at this letter. So spacing here, I'm looking for the oval shapes and making sure I'm ending it intentionally with a nice curved line here. Okay, making sure that I'm crossing at nearly right angles, and that when I'm crossing a shade, I have to keep it a hairline stroke. And I'm checking all these angles here, making sure of my shapes. And I also have this ending portion that's also connected to this shape. Okay, so this is kind of how my mind works, is that when I'm looking at my letters, I'm just double checking all of those basic rules of flourishing that we talked about, is maintaining ovals, staying consistent with your slant, finishing off your strokes with graceful curves, crossing lines at right angles, and also not to cross shades with a shade. Okay, let's move on to the letter N. This letter N, you start with your capital stem. I'm going to do loop around. And this time I'm just going to bring it up all the way up here. I'm just going to stop it right there. Add your shade and then bring it back up. And loop it back in. Okay? So notice that for this N, if I could make a change, this area should be similar to this. So I would probably want to extend this out or make this a little bit more narrow. I think I would have wanted to maybe come down along here. Use my red pen here instead, making a little bit more. I think it was too much of a big space here. Okay, so then over here, what I was thinking was I stopped it here because, and as I was drawing in, writing in that hairline stroke, I just made sure that I was maintaining the even spacing throughout and keeping that oval shape, as well as this oval shape. Okay, so this is good for if you have, again, words next to the letter N that only take up the X height, or even with a something on the bottom is fine because there's nothing at the bottom here. Okay, the next capital letter we're going to do together is the letter I. And this time I'm going to try to use a flourish that goes from the capital stem underneath the baseline. Horizontal oval. And I'm just feeling that one's really wet, so I picked up my pen there. Bring back in. Okay, and then I'm going to go back, finish the top part of the eye. Have a slight curve. Lift my pen because it might be wet. And bringing it back in and cross the top of the capital stem. Okay, so here again, notice that I'm not keeping these loops the same. Okay, so here is my initial loop here from the capital stem. My initial oval is this big. My second oval here is a little bit smaller, and then I change directions and I'm doing now a horizontal oval this way. Okay, and then even for here, I'm just trying to maintain a good spacing of my finishing stroke, and then having a nice curve in this section as well as here. Nice oval curve. Just imagining that there are ovals snugged up in that shape. Okay, so now we're going to do the letter J. J is also a capital stem, but it doesn't stop at the baseline, but J is a letter that actually occupies 5 spaces. You go from about below your second ascender line and all the way down to your second descender line. So for this one, I have to do a capital stem that goes from here to here. I'm just going to create a loop, open up that curve, and then bring it into that horizontal oval. Okay, and then I'm going to finish off this letter. So here we can finish it like this, like we did with the I. But what I've come to realize with the J is that because it's such a long letter and there's a flourish down here, I like to add a bit of a flourish on top. So this is one of those flourishes that I've experimented with and just kind of made up on my own. Is you can either put this flourish, bring this kind of in an oval shape down like this, or I actually like adding a small loop here, bringing it back up, and adding a loop. Okay, so those are just two different ways you can end your J's. Let me write that with the ink. Give space. It's your capital stem. Then the top of your, I usually like to pause here at your waistline. And then we're going to make a small loop, curve it down, add a shade to the top. So notice, if you notice this particular flourish, I just like how it brings a balance to this letter because this letter again is so long, it takes up about 5 spaces. There's a flourish that we can always experiment with on the bottom, but the top feels really bare, which is why I added a loop and then just added a couple loops here to create a more of a flourish for that J. Okay, so again, with even this bottom loop here, you can have so many different variations that we did using all of the ones that we talked about for the descending stem loop variations. And if you wanted to, you could have just come down here and then added a loop like that. If you wanted to bring it more down instead of up. So this is part of just playing with flourishes that I love, is that there's just endless possibilities and things that you can do. And especially as you work on pieces and write letters or words or names, you're going to just be forced to challenge yourself to think of different varieties or flourishes that you can use. And that's the whole fun of this whole topic, is that there are certain rules, but then there's also just so many options for you to play with. Okay, so next lesson is we're gonna continue on with more letters that contain the capital stem for group 2.